Hello and welcome to Game Theory. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, Adam Finkelstein is joining the show for the first time, and we are going to talk about 6 prospects that I don't know. I truly don't know who Adam wants to talk about here, so it's going to be amazing. I am super, super excited to dive into this. It's going to be really fun. We're going to start by talking about Egor Demin and Darryn Peterson. Then we're going to get into 6 prospects, and I couldn't be more excited to find out who Adam wants to talk about. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this gonna be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see is completely orchestrated this game. Adam, what's going on, man?
Not much. Thanks for having me. This is fun. Part two. I'm excited.
For people who don't know, I went over on Adam's show over on 24/7 and talked about some international players, what we think of this 2024 NBA draft. We kind of dove into a few different things that I was excited to talk about. And now Adam's doing the home and home, and I couldn't be happier to have him here. It's great. Yeah, so Adam, for people who aren't familiar, tell the people all about what's going on with you and who you are and what you do.
Got it. So I am, this is my 3rd season at CBS and 24/7. So I'm in charge of the high school rankings there. And I also do the draft for CBS. That came after, I think it was 12 years at ESPN. Been like 15 years in this now. And prior to that, I'd coached, did 3 years in college. I was 24 when I was on the road at Hartford. And then I did a couple of years with Marty Blake when he was doing like the NBA scouting apprentice program. So that was really cool too. Yeah, that's my story.
I love it. It's fantastic. Adam, the premise of this show today is going to be that when we talked on the phone, I told you, you know what? This is going to be your canvas, right? You get to pick 6 prospects that we talk about, and we're just going to go for it. And we're going to see what you want to talk about. We're just going to go for it. And I don't know who they are. And then we're just going to go, right? But first, before we get into that, there are 2 players that I have to talk about with you.
All right, great.
And I think you had already watched the BYU Central Arkansas game before I told you to. If you hadn't, I hope that you did.
Oh no, I did.
Yeah.
I was tweeting. It was election night, and I just wanted to watch a game. I didn't want to watch politics. I just wanted to watch a game, and it was the only game on. It was either that or Arizona State. There was no NBA games, and so I turned it on, and Egor Demin entertained the heck out of me. So that was fun.
And Central Arkansas is not a team without talent. So they're like 330th in Ken Palm or whatever. But I will say, Elias Cato, kid from Queensland, went to Sunrise Christian. And he is somebody that will play in the NBL. He's a professional basketball player. The Fag Pennie guard, I can't remember who he is. He's somebody that I asked a couple of coaches about. They were like, yeah, probably a lower level professional European basketball player if he wants to. So I say that to say that Central Arkansas is not their defense was not very good in this game. They played his own. It was really, really messy, but they aren't an untalented team. They aren't a team without interesting players. And Egor Demin just cut these dudes up. There's not another way to put it. He just lit these dudes up across the board. I did a breakdown last night over on the post Game Theory shows I've been doing on YouTube. This will go up on both the YouTube and the podcast feeds. If you want to go see the breakdown I did on Egor Demin, that'll be up on the YouTube channel. My goodness. I mean, Adam, when I watched it, I was like, this is what a top 5 pick looks like.
Yeah, it's it's ironic because we had recorded on my show on a Monday. What is a Monday night for me here on the East Coast, and it was going live on a Wednesday, and we had talked about Egor. So my first reaction was, holy, can I swear on this show? Is swearing allowed? So my first reaction was, holy shit. And then it quickly went to, oh shit, we didn't talk about this. So it was because it was just so impressive. The totality of what he did, and just the overall feel for the game, the ability to hit all parts of the court, really stood out, especially at his size. The shooting was better than I expected. I'd heard there were a lot of concerns about his shooting, and it looked clean to me. Even talking to some people around the program, they're like, yeah, he hadn't shot it that well in the preseason, but there didn't seem to be anything mechanically wrong with the stroke. And just someone who can manipulate the game, see the floor, and think and see the game at such a high level. It was really one of those moments. I just like to say you don't need any kind of scout to see how good he was in that game. I mean, there were nuances that maybe some people can appreciate beyond others, but his dominance was easy to see for the most part. It was really one of those games that made you say, like, okay, we've got a quick answer to this. Who else could be in the top 5 conversation?
100%. So with the jumper, the thing that I pointed to on the show that I did last night was he used to be a guy that like really unnaturally bent his wrist backward whenever he would shoot the ball and then would flick it forward. And I think it led to the shot being a little bit of a lower trajectory, a little bit flatter.
Yeah.
Whereas now when you look at the shot at BYU, he's kind of just coming up more flat with the wrist compared to the rest of his arm. And it just looks cleaner to me in terms of the jumper. Also, his base looks better. Like he's done real work on the shot. Like I literally had to like go back and like pull Real tape and like look at the BYU tape and just be like, oh no, this is real. This is a thing. So
I don't have anywhere near the same context. I would say that the defense, I thought, in particular, like navigating screens, I was like, all right, this may be an issue. But what somebody pointed to me, and you've probably watched this game, I was on the summer recruiting circuit, was this summer when he went up against, I think it was Traore. They said, like, you watch that game and you'll see what he can be defensively. But, it could be an issue, but we know there's an upside there that based on what we saw this summer. And like I said, it was one of those, it's rare when a kid, I'll say this, so often the international kids who come over to the college game have an adjustment with the speed and the physicality. Yeah. And it's rare when someone is this good, this quickly. I think a lot of that is the fit with the scheme and the system. And Kevin Young is schematically as good as advertised, it appears. But I was just not expecting him to be that good that quickly.
I totally agree. I was super, super impressed with what I saw from Egor. The other thing, I mean, you mentioned the passing. He had 11 assists in this game. I think he could have had 18 to 20, just 100%. The way that he dished the ball out. I mean, every single pass, every single one was directly in the shooting pocket. Every single time. It was just perfectly on point, immediately where the shooter wanted it. That stuff to me is just like, okay, there's real attention to detail here. There is serious accuracy. He threw one in the first half where he drove. It was his first like big pass of the game. He drives, goes right hand, sees that it's a 1-on-2 on the weak side, manipulates the 1-on-2 defender to go baseline and whips a ball with full velocity up to the opposite wing from underneath the basket. And I'm just like, okay, this is a joke. Like, this is where we're at already.
That's one of the things, especially I found myself being like, this poor like Central Arkansas coach, because we're seeing this more and more, but like the passers who defy conventional defensive rotations, like you're one, but I'm not one pass away. Oh yes, you are, you better be careful where you help from, because he was just spitting it all over the court. And to your point, he was doing it with accuracy. It was, I can't wait. I was at the AJ DeBonsa, Nate Ament game last night, and the BYU staff was there. I was like, when are you guys playing again? I got to turn it on. It's like must see TV now. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So the second guy I need to talk about with you is Darryn Peterson. So Darryn Peterson is the other guy in that mix with AJ DeBanza, Cam Boozer. You can throw Nate Ament in that mix, certainly a top 10 kid in that class. I think you guys might have him at 4 or 5 right now.
Yeah, we have him at 4. Those are our 4. Yep.
Yeah, and look, I think Nate's probably not quite as developed as those guys from what I've seen, but in terms of long upside, like long-term viability as a player, you can just be like, oh no, this is a joke. Like this is something that will get figured out. Darryn Peterson is going to Kansas. He just committed over the weekend. And I feel like because of the DeBanza and Boozer hype on some level, that Darryn Peterson, I don't think he gets lost in the shuffle. Like, I'm sure he's making a crazy amount of money in NIL to go to Kansas, and I'm sure that it's all going to be great. But when I watch Darryn Peterson, I'm like, oh no, this guy is in their class.
Yeah.
As a player.
Yeah.
Like I think that, look, I get AJ, like I get thinking that AJ is a level above these guys in terms of long-term upside. I think it's fair. I think it's reasonable. But man, Darryn Peterson is a disgusting, disgusting guard. He is so sick.
He really is. And I think, in terms of how he compares to other guards in the class, he's been number 1, and he's been number 1 since the beginning. And one of the things that I'm particularly sensitive to, concentrating the majority of my time in the high school ranks, is really the burden that sometimes being called so good so early can cause. Like I tell kids all the time, like, you may not want to be ranked as a sophomore. We actually didn't do sophomore rankings this year. Just we trying to delay it as long as we can. We're just doing junior and seniors. I think we'll do sophomores sooner rather than later. But it turns into more of a curse than a blessing, really, because it puts these expectations on. It causes you that many more cameras to start following you. What I've been most impressed with Peterson from that perspective is that despite all the hype and the Adidas NIL deal and all that goes with it, he's a pretty down-to-earth kid. Like he understands. I'm sure he's not naive to all the business considerations. I mean, listen, like his family's got their own Adidas program. Like it is what it is. But he doesn't play with any sense of entitlement. He keeps getting better at every step along the way. He appears to be a good teammate. He's in the best shape of his life. You don't see him playing to the cameras anywhere near as often as you do some of these other guys. So I've really liked everything that I've seen. You articulated it really well. I think this was a tweet you sent. Something I'm going to paraphrase. Something about the overlap of skill and physicality at 6'5" with the 6'10" wingspan. And I remember I saw the tweet and I was like, damn it, I wish I articulated it like that. But that's really it. And the thing I like to say about him is he's just got this effortless ability to play within the flow of the game and create for himself or others at multiple levels. Like if you had to say what's the weak link in his game right now, he would tell you. In fact, he told me when I talked to him this summer that it's catch and shoot threes. That's the part of his game that he's working to get more consistent on. But again, just like we said with Denim, and I think even more so with Peterson, it is a mechanically clean, repeatable stroke with good touch. There's nothing in there that makes you say, oh, he's not going to be able to shoot long term. So I'm buying that. I don't think he separates as naturally as someone like AJ or something like that. So I think the length and the physicality is going to become an important thing. But the thing that he does, Sam, this kid has such an advanced understanding of how to get to the free throw line. For a 17-year-old to have that level of manipulation in the best way possible to get easy points that way, when he's not necessarily the type of guy. I mean, he's a good athlete, but he's not like soaring through the lane going to dunk over two guys. There's just that level of sophistication. Same thing in the way he thinks the game. So I'm with you. It's why he's been the best guard from start to finish. And just to wrap up the point, that's a really hard thing to do. For someone to tell you you're the best when you're a sophomore and to still be the best when you're a senior, as new players are emerging throughout those 2 years, that means you kept getting better at each step along the process.
I'm so glad that you brought up that idea, first and foremost, that he's not like a crazy athlete. Like he reminds me more of like a Donovan Mitchell than like an Anthony Edwards when you watch them now in the NBA, right? Like Donovan Mitchell was a sick athlete when he was super young, but
Ridiculous.
when you watch him,
yeah.
Unbelievable, like completely unbelievable. But now, like since he's had like a couple of knee injuries and everything, like he's more of a technician, right? He is unbelievable footwork. He has this ability to get into the paint, to draw contact, to finish below the rim at a really high level with his footwork. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Peterson is a professional in terms of that yet. He's not quite at that level, but you can see where that's going. You can see that he has the balance and the capability to be able to get to that level at some point. The other thing that I love is just the competitiveness. That dude is so competitive on the court. Like the defense, it's not perfect. Like he gets over aggressive sometimes, but like he wants to win games. Like he is out there to win basketball games every single time he's out there. He's not out there for himself. The final thing that I'll say is he is the archetype of a guard that I want now in the NBA. A 6'5" kid with long arms who can, I think, both play on and off the ball.
For sure.
In that vein, it is very similar to a Donovan Mitchell and Anthony Edwards, you know, whoever you want to bring up. He's different than those guys just in terms of what the athleticism is, what the skill level is. I think he's actually like, honestly, a little bit more, I'd be interested to hear your take. I think he's a little bit more developed as a shooter than Ant was at this age.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly than Donovan was. But yes, I would agree. I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with certainly not as explosive. But I'd say he's probably better than both of these kids shooting at this stage.
Yeah. So I'm excited to watch where it goes. I think Kansas is a really good fit for him. Kansas makes a lot of sense. They do a good job with these guys that can play on the ball as well as off the ball. The guys that I wonder about with Kansas sometimes are their scheme under Bill isn't like amazing for these kind of off ball wings only. Like a Wayne Selden, for instance. And, you know, Wayne ended up just not being quite good enough, but also he is somebody that didn't get used a ton early on within that scheme. So I think it's a better fit for guys who can really handle the ball in a real way.
Yeah.
So I think it will work at Kansas. And I think he's going to be a one and done and will be end up. I think that, you know, you don't want to put this on someone early to your point, but he projects well as a top 5 pick, if not a lottery pick.
And here's the thing I would say. I've become very sensitive about what I say about these kids, but the reality is he's one of those kids that has probably already decided that he's one and done before he even begins his senior year of high school basketball. Like that is the trajectory. Everything they were. Now you can pivot off that. Elliot Cadeau had decided that too, and he pivoted off it. But I think that is certainly the expectation for DP, as everybody calls him, going into Kansas. And I think that was well known in his recruitment as well.
Yeah. Okay, Adam. I'm basically giving you the show at this point here.
Yeah. So here's my thing. So I was coming up with all 6 and we're live. So I guess I better come up with 2 more because I came up with 3 and then a backup guy. So are these now you tell me, we're doing college guys, right? These are NBA prospects.
College or NBA. It's up. I told you that the world is open to you.
The world's my oyster. Okay. So we're going to start college. I'm going to go 3 of my favorites, and then I'm going to go for one that I think you will probably push back on because most people are right now, but I'm kind of a believer in, you know, buy low and then sell high. So my first guy is it. Now, let me preface this if I could by saying I consume your show and I'm not going to bother repeating guys that I think we already have in common. I'm a card-carrying member of the Liam McNeely fan club. I think I was one of the founders of that island. But I think we're on the same page with that one. So there's no need to go like too far down that rabbit hole when we probably have both already done it. So this to me was guys who are maybe a little less obvious, guys who could sneak their way into the first round conversation or potentially higher. First name I've got for you is Jaland Lowe at Pittsburgh.
There we go.
Someone I talked about at my show. One of the best, I think, NBA prospects in the ACC. Someone who is, I I think going to have a huge breakout sophomore season. That doesn't sound like such a hot take after he started the year with, I think it was 21, 6, 5, and 3 with 0 turnovers or something absurd like that. But Sam, I loved this kid in high school, and just like timeline wise, this Peach Jam was like my first one at 24/7. So I was coming from a place where I hadn't been overly familiar with him, and we have him in the 70s or something, and I'm watching him, and every year I kind of have one of these guys where I'm like, oh no, that guy's needs to be like way much higher. And he was that player for me. Now I went back and I checked kind of what I had on him in high school, and I wrote down silky smooth, great feel, really skilled, untapped upside as his body fills out. And I think that's still kind of the eval, although it's gone down. You know, the shot making has gotten more dynamic. The creativity is more pronounced now. I think that last year we saw an idea of what he could look like. Not initially because he had a little bit of a preseason injury, but later in the year when he got in the starting lineup and in ACC play in particular, the numbers really told the story. And obviously Bub Carrington was already rolling at that point. But the ball is his this year. This is a Pittsburgh team that I think was 96th percentile in terms of number of ball screens in their offense last year. He's the clear quarterback. Like, he's going to have the ball. He's going to have freedom. And I've just always thought this was a guy who has a ton of game with the ball in his hands.
Is this like a New England thing? Quarterback?
Yeah, for sure. No, it's an all right. This is funny. So you text Norlander. Norlander teases me for this all the time. I love the analogies. I'm going to do that a lot. Yeah. And the accent, the quarterback thing that's a New England thing. Yeah.
That's a good one. I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay. Yeah. So Jaland Lowe. I like Jaland Lowe a lot. I'm a fan. I generally, it takes a lot for me to come around on small guards. Now, what I like about Jaland is exactly what you said in terms of him being able to be very silky smooth. The thing that refers to best for me is the decision making. He never really looks sped up, never really looks like he is out of kilter or rushed. And I think that leads to really high level passing and playmaking for everybody else on the team. He reminds me a little bit of Jordan McLaughlin on some level, the old USC point guard who's now playing for the Timberwolves.
Yeah.
Smaller kid. Basically needs to hit, like, with the smaller guards, what I always worry about is they have no margin for error, right? Now, I've had a couple of people.
Small, do you mean like frame or do you mean height? Because he's always been listed at 6'3". I looked and I don't have official measurements, but he's always been listed at 6'3".
So I always assume listed at 6'3" means probably like 6'1.5", 6'2" without shoes, right? Like, that's what it seems like to me when I watch him play. And that's what it seems like to me, at least. You know, him standing next to guys, trying to figure all that out. Also very thin. So when you combine those two things, he is kind of a smaller guard at the end of the day by NBA standards. Not for college standards, he's fine for this. NBA, there's just like a different level, obviously, as you know. So those guys basically have to be perfect. There's no margin for error. And I've had a couple of people reach out to me and ask, like, hey, what do you think he needs to do to get better? Like, people close to him, you know, a couple of, you know, agents here and there. And what I said was basically footwork around the rim is like a big thing for him. Needs to be able to finish below the rim. Also needs to be able to develop like a solid in-between game where he has like an option with like a little floater or something like that, where he can actually just have a counter to present instead of just shooting threes or just driving to pass, right? He needs an option to score so that he can keep defenders honest on the interior. I think he can I think he can develop that. Like, I don't want to rule that out for him by any stretch of the imagination. Right now, no, maybe not right now. Last season, I felt like that was what held him back a little bit when I watched him, in my opinion. But that's stuff that you can work on. That's stuff that you can work through. I think he displays the touch that he needs to develop like a nice little floater game. I think that he displays on the perimeter the smoothness with his movements to be able to continue to develop the footwork when he drives. So I actually really like Jaland Lowe. I think this is a good player. I had him in my mock originally, immediately after the 2024 draft. So in July, when I published that, I had him in the top 30.
Oh, so we're on the same page. Yeah.
So I ended up, I talked to scouts preseason and they told me maybe not.
Yeah.
So I ended up not listing him for the second one. But if it was like a top 100 board, I would absolutely have Jaland Lowe in my top 50 right now. I know that. I don't know where he'd be within that, but he'd definitely be in my top 50.
In the way that I'm categorizing them right now is like potential lottery pick, potential first round pick, potential second round or two-way guy. And he's someone that I'm calling a potential first round pick, like can play his way into that territory. That's where I've got him. The one thing that I would add, I was watching his first game. He's very crafty if he has space around the rim because he can finish at real wide angles with dexterity. You know, so he can come down and he can go from 3 to 6 with both hands, but that relies on having enough shooting around him so there aren't bodies at 3 and 6, at 3 and 9 on the virtual clock, if you will. But in traffic, that is a different calculus to your point. All right, I like that one. All right, so I'm on the board for number 2 here.
You're on the board for number 2. Let's do it.
All right, and I would also just like to point out my New England accent at all. That was a little bit of a hometown lob to the host of the show wearing a Pittsburgh hat to start with the kid from Pittsburgh. Just
that's true.
You know, yeah,
that is absolutely true.
All right, I'm gonna go with another 6'5" lefty guard, Marquette. This would be Kam Jones, another one who I've got, who I just don't think is getting talked about enough. And again, he's not like, I don't have him in the teens or any, I don't think he's a lottery pick or anything like that. 22 years old, had a really explosive February last year when Tyler Kolek was out with his injury. This guy had 30 4 different times. I don't think people remember that. They don't talk about it. For opening game of the season this year, he had 32 in 26 minutes on 16 shots. He was 14 of 16 from the floor, 3 assists. And there's going to be a very similar argument about him than there was to Lowe, maybe even more so in terms of like, you look at his shot chart. It's an analytics darling in terms of like rims and threes, at least in that first, there was no mid-range shots in that first game. But the pick and roll navigation without Tyler Kolek in the lineup was really impressive. I thought Shaka and those guys were running like good stuff for him, kind of atypical angles they were letting him operate out of. There's a lot of shooting, so he has a ton of space with Ben Gold and David Joplin in their front court. Both of those guys can space it. I want to say they took a combined 10 3-pointers in that opening game. And the thing to me is he's a shooting threat. He's got on-off ball versatility, and he's a shooting threat off screens, both like on and off the ball. So not only can he play the 1 or the 2, but he can pull up behind a ball screen and take a 3. He can run off a pin down and take a 3. So I think he's got, that kind of versatility where, you need somebody who can play various positions, give you some gravity and force defenders to try and fight over the top of the ball screen. I just think he's a guy that we're not talking enough about.
So I agree with you. I had Kam Jones, I think, in my first round in both of the mocks that I did. So I really like Kam Jones quite a bit. So you mentioned the scoring ability. You mentioned the on and off the ball ability. Mm-hmm. I love that he uses the threat of his shot incredibly well in order to separate from defenders. He loves all those little mini pump fakes. He uses like a mini shot fake from time to time to change pace and separate. Can make them off the hop, can make them off the bounce, can go 1-2 step into it, can make them from a variety of footworks. Made 41.1% of his pull-up threes as a junior. Incredibly effective in ball screens. Another guy, like everyone talked about Kolek with Oso Ighodaro, myself included. I mean, that was my favorite duo to watch in college basketball last season. But Kam Jones was just as important because a lot of what they did was they would run like zoom actions or just flat DHOs with Kam Jones and Oso and let Kam Jones get downhill, either going to his right or to his left, and let him attack. Made 35% out of DHOs from 3 as a junior. Looking through here, 67% at the rim. You mentioned a guard here that was basically only rims and 3s, right? Shots to the
game
rim.
one.
And
Game 1. That the shot chart was nothing in mid. His 16 field goals attempts first game were all rims and 3s.
Love it. Last year he shot 67% at the rim, which is an insane, absurd number for a player who. Do you know how many dunks he had last year, Adam?
I don't, and I'm gonna guess it's not that high. But he doesn't play with like a ton of pop in the lane. What was it?
2. He had 2 dunks.
Yeah.
And made 67% at the rim, despite only having 2 dunks. That's a crazy, crazy high number. Look, this is like a offensive powerhouse to me. Like they're so good. They were amazing with Oso. And I think they're going to be pretty good with Gold and with Joplin playing in the front court again. They're going to have great spacing. Kam Jones is great. I truly do love him. I think he has a nice little floater game as well. Yeah.
Right.
So here's my concern, and I'll ask you this question now. I thought he was pretty poor on defense last year. I thought he was pretty rough. Like, I didn't think he was all that terrible on the ball. Like, if he was one-on-one with the guy, I thought he did a pretty good job sticking. But off the ball, I felt like he got lost a lot. I did the Kam Jones like scout in the preseason.
I was going to say you went deep into this one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Not a lot is going to change to me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, he's a guy that either he's going to add to the passing repertoire or he's not. But we know what the scoring is already, and we've seen him be a guy that needs to defend. And the other thing I worried about was, so he's listed at 6'5". I don't feel like he plays that big. And where I see it most is actually on defense when he tries to cover ground. Like, if you see him like in 1-on-2 situations on the backside, like, it feels like he basically has to guess one way or another. Otherwise, he's just kind of going to get stuck. And he's not going to be able to cover the ground to get all the way to either the corner or to the wing. So
I will say this. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's all. That's what I was going to say. Just like, he needs to be a little bit better defensively, I think. And I would like to see him continue to make the growth as a distributor. You mentioned the games without Kolek. So 6 games, the final 6 games of Marquette's regular season, he played point guard, had 4.5 assists per game with a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio.
Yeah. I think admittedly have not dug into the defense, specifically the off-ball defense, to the same extent you have. But I will say this, Chase Ross, like just like those big guys are ideal for him to play with. Chase Ross is an ideal guard for him to play with, because that guy's like a physical monster who is like, no, I'll guard their best, give me their best guard, and you can go stick to whoever their floor spacer is. So it does make the game a little bit easier for him on that end, for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm excited to watch them. I did not watch their opener. I am excited to watch them play like an interesting team. Here's a question for you, Adam, as you go through and you scout these kids. My tendency, and I got pilled into watching Demin because everyone was like, no, you need to watch this like immediately. Right.
Yeah, I tweeted his halftime box score. I was like, this is amazing. I was like, this is great. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched it yesterday morning, so like the morning after, he played, and I got told like I just have to see it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's what a top 5 pick is supposed to look like, is the way it was phrased to me by literally multiple NBA scouts. They were like, dude, I'm telling you just got to watch it. I tend to, when I'm watching a player for the first time in a season, I prefer to watch them play a good team first. I don't love watching them play like I haven't watched Illinois yet, because Illinois played Eastern Illinois It didn't seem like a particularly competitive game. I love Yakashonis. I'm at least intrigued by Will Riley, but I want to see them play a good team first, right? That's why I focused my attention on Texas, Ohio State first yesterday, or 2 days ago, because I was like, okay, these are two teams that are pretty good. I want to see what Tre Johnson looks like against a real defense. I want to see what Bruce Thornton looks like. Is he taking a bit of a leap yet? Anything like that. What is your process kind of for evaluating these kids earlier in the season? Do you have one, or are you just kind of checking out everything you can?
So it's a little different because I've watched so many of these kids for so long. So really what organically resonates with me is the surprises. So like you mentioned Tre Johnson. The shot making didn't surprise me, although I could tell you wouldn't have surprised me if the ball didn't go in either. Like he's going to have, he would have taken all the same shots, and some nights he's going to miss them and some nights he's not going to. What resonated with me were the passes he made. Now, granted, the majority of them were kind of in a more, how would I articulate this? Like a more narrow field of vision. There was only one where like he really spit it out and showed like really wide angles of vision. But I thought the passing, both the willingness to make the pass and some high level feeds, I thought that resonated for me. So like organically, when I see something that's just vastly different than what I saw in high school, that's what's going to stick out. In terms of what game I'm going to watch, I'm not going to lie to you, Sam. Like there's just an aesthetic element to it. Like I'm the guy who admittedly will like flip initially, and I'll be like, this game is more pleasing to watch. I'm going to watch this game. And the game that's just ugly basketball, I will watch on Synergy tomorrow when it doesn't take up 2 hours of my life. That's typically how I do it. Like if it's an entertaining, aesthetically pleasing game, I will watch the whole thing and hear the commentary and so on and so forth. If it's bad ball, like the late great Norm Evanson used to say, I'll watch it on Synergy the next morning and take 30 minutes of my life.
I very rarely watch games totally live now. I want like
Australia advantage.
Well, like even so, the Celtics Warriors played last night, and I knew I was going to talk about that on the stream I did last night. Right. Mm-hmm. I still waited for that game to like I think I started watching it when the actual game time was midway through the second quarter, so that I could just zoom through ads and everything. And you did that on Synergy? I did that one on KO, which is like the streaming app here in Australia. But like I did that on like the ESPN streaming app here, basically.
So you can just fast forward through the commercials.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll do it on Synergy as well. Yeah. But most of the time I do it on if it's a game that's on TV, I'll do it on, just like the app, because it's a little bit higher quality.
Do you clip it while you watch it?
Yes, absolutely.
With Game Breaker?
Snag It is what I use. Game Breaker's interesting. I might have to
hold on. I'm writing down Snag It.
We're taking notes on each other here. This is great. So yeah, Tre Johnson's a fun one to talk about just briefly. Yeah. The other thing that I will note about Tre Johnson is I wouldn't say Tre Johnson was like particularly active on defense, but he knew where he had to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like he had like 4 or 5 instances of helping the helper, right? Mm-hmm. He had a couple of instances where he knew he had to rotate over from the weak side and be available at the rim.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like that was stuff when I watched him previously, just like on Synergy, where it was like, okay, I don't think he's really doing this all that often. It's high school basketball. I don't know if he really cares. Like, yeah, it's fine. Whatever.
Who's holding him accountable to that? Like, what are the ramifications if you don't rotate? There are none,
100%. So when I watched him last night or 2 nights ago, whenever I watched this game, I was like, okay, like he instinctually knows where he needs to be. Mm-hmm. It's not particularly active. Like, it's not like he was like out there, like rushing at the ball, like hands high and doing everything. But I liked that he had the awareness, and I liked that his mind was whirring and like he was moving and knew where he needed to go.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I think that in addition to the passing, like I said, he's going to have good shooting nights. He's going to have bad shooting nights. But if there's growth in those other areas, because that's always been the question on Tre. How does he impact the game when he's not scoring? And if he's not the focal point? Those are some of the questions that people are going to dive into. So I think that's a really relevant point.
By the way, Junie Mobley is just like the best.
Yes, he is
across the board.
Yes,
I saw him live because he played on the.
Yes, he is.
I saw him live at Hoop Summit. That was the first time I'd seen him play live. He played on the Washington Generals team.
Okay.
The team that they bring in to play the Hoop Summit kids.
Yep.
Oh, he just he lit up the world team real quick.
You know what I will tell you? Quick 30 seconds on Junie. Junie, when he was a rising junior, he was back at Bishop Gorman in Vegas. He was playing, I think it was like Vegas Elite 16s. And he had just like stupid Steph Curry range and kind of had that low release point too.
Yeah.
In his junior year, you could see he was starting to get into the weight room and his release point changed like ever so subtly. And he was still clearly one of the best shooters in high school basketball. But I didn't think I used to say, I remember I told the scout this a few weeks ago, I thought his release was more pure, albeit a little lower when he was younger. His release in that Ohio State game looked to me like it did when he was a junior. Like he's back to shooting it like he did naturally. And it's a little low, but when you're pulling up from 35, who cares?
Yeah, literally his first shot in that game, like he's on the court for 30 seconds, just chucks from 30 feet and drills it. Oh my God, I love Junie Mobley so much. Okay, third player, Adam Finkelstein.
All right, let's find one that's a little more we can debate about. So this one's a little more controversial. I'm gonna go, and I have my questions about this, but I'm gonna go KJ Evans from Oregon, and I'm gonna make a similar point to the one I just did about Junie, but with an opposite kind of observation, and that's the way his shooting has evolved. But I'm going to start with this. KJ Evans, I think, great example of what I was talking about earlier. I think he was like the number one sophomore in the country at one point. And what that meant was that his talent, his tools, let's say, were most glaring at that point because he was a 6'9" lefty who couldn't have been more smooth in terms of the way he ran and covered the court and moved on the basketball floor. He's also nearly ambidextrous. For a lefty kid, he's got a terrific right hand. Not like a Ben Simmons where he's actually right-handed, but like literally has great use of both hands. When you talk to people around him, particularly at high school, his reputation, the knock on KJ has always been like, the motor doesn't run super hot, but I think some people have like doubled down too far in that. He's never been like a defiantly not going to compete guy. He's just one of those players that operates at a very kind of constant level and tends to be expressionless. So I think the concerns of the motor can get exaggerated at times. And he's always been a beloved teammate. Now, what's interesting about him, when you're the number one sophomore in the country, you're a 5-star guy or whatever, everybody expects you to go out and get 30. That's never been who KJ was. He's naturally most comfortable when he can be a secondary guy. He might be most comfortable when he can be the 4th or 5th option on the floor. Knowing that, I think his swing skill is the shooting. Now, I like the look of the shot a lot more in his senior year in high school than I do right now. I thought it was more fluid. I thought it was more confident. So that's got to come around. But if and when it does, I just think 6'9" guys who move as effortlessly as he does, who have the potential to be super versatile, who pick up plays really quickly, who have a high feel, who are beloved teammates by all accounts, those guys tend to make it in the NBA, even if they don't turn into like the offensive alphas that some hope they might in college because they were really high rated recruits.
So first and foremost, I'm glad that you brought up the idea of the fact that he always got hit for the motor, because at Oregon last year, I felt like he regularly was always in the right spots. I felt like he was engaged in the game. I felt like he was a really active defender. last season and was kind of everywhere on the court, covered a ton of ground for them. And guys like that are that active on defense and that active without the ball, they're not engaged in the game, because you're 100% right. Like, I've heard that about KJ Evans. Honestly, I think that I had heard that about KJ Evans before I had seen KJ Evans play.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of filtered through my process before I got to see him. And when I saw him, I was like, wait, like, is this the same guy? Like, is this the same person that I'm supposed to be seeing right now? So there's that. I'm glad that you brought that up. For him, like, the equation is super simple. Like you said, he has to shoot the ball. If he doesn't shoot the ball, he's not an NBA player. I like the fact that he made free throws last year. And maybe this is another thing where we can get into like a philosophical discussion of what you think of this. I tend to not be somebody that just automatically says, oh, this guy made free throws, he'll be able to shoot threes. I think there is a thought process out there that some people think that those two things, they're obviously similar in some respect. Yeah. And part of the reason that people use free throw percentage is because it's a decent control, because everybody takes free throws, right?
Also, like, low hanging fruit, right? It's like, oh, he shoots free throws. Yeah, it's like easy to cite.
Totally. But guys that I think tend to struggle with shooting threes are the ones that sometimes, like, there's something just not bad about the balance, but like slightly off about the balance. And a lot of the times I think it affects these kids that are like a little bit bigger, a little bit longer. And I felt like with him last year, he just never looked totally organized, kind of, with his feet as a shooter. And I think I think that would go a long way if he can get himself just like organized with his feet and get his balance under him more than anything. That would be the swing skill for him to be able to become an NBA player, because I buy the defense. I buy his activity level. I buy his athleticism. There's so many things to like about KJ Evans, but he has to shoot it. So I wouldn't say that like he's a potential first rounder. If we're throwing him into the buckets that you have, 100% like a potential first rounder for me. I think I've certainly mocked him as a late first rounder in 2025 previously. But I would just like to see where the shooting gets to this year is kind of where I'm at.
100%. Same page. 2 for 5 from 3 in the opening game, 5 for 5 from the free throw line. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you go back and you watch all those reps on Synergy, it's not like it's clean. You know, if normally 2 for 5, you're like, okay, great. You know, this is projectable. But you mentioned the free throws. I'm big on the fluidity of the release. That to me is important. And I'm also, the longer I do this, especially lately, I can't remember if you and I talked about this, but I think the mental component about shooting is one that we probably don't talk about too much. And also the potential that players can regress as shooters because of some of that mental components. Like, Markelle Fultz isn't the only guy in that bucket. There's a long list of guys who kind of trended the wrong way with shooting. If KJ, when KJ was at Montverde, I remember sitting Eric Bossi and I, Hoop Hall Classic. And I remember like smacking him on the arm, being like, this guy's, it was so fluid, so clean, so comfortable. Doesn't look like that right at the moment. If he can get that back, I know that's a huge caveat. I think you and I are basically saying the same thing, but I've seen him do it before. And so it's just, I'm not sure if it could be the base, it could be the mind. It's probably some combination of both. You know, it's probably like a holistic thing where one impacts the other. Whatever the root of it is, though, if he shoots, he's a definite pro.
Yes, I agree. 100% an NBA player if he shoots it, because everything else is there. And to your point earlier on, doesn't seem like a guy that is worried about his touches like at the craziest level. You know what I mean? I'm sure he wants touches, but like, Yeah, he doesn't want to be that like star level player, and those guys tend to filter nicely into role players into the NBA.
And Sam, to that point, I will tell you that there was when he committed to Oregon, there was a group of people around him, close to him in high school, who believed that like he could be one of the players who joined like a Fab Five type class. He could have been one of 5 freshmen to go to Duke or Kentucky or wherever and been very comfortable in a secondary role like that, because it's not who he is. Like he's not. That was the knock on high school. He can't create his own offense. And like they did some things with him. They ducked, he was ducking in. He was exploiting mismatches in the post in that opening game. But it was UC Riverside. I'm not sure how much of that, let's not get too excited about it. But I don't think he needs to do all that. He's not going to, in terms of what his pro role is, he just needs to shoot. Just needs to shoot because he's a willing ball mover. If you watch Montverde as much as I have over the years, it becomes very clear just by kind of like body language out of timeouts who can and can't remember plays. That's, he's always been able to execute from that standpoint. So I'm holding out hope. I'm not selling my KJ Evans stock. I'll say it that way.
I like it. Yeah, neither am I. I'm generally with you on him. Like I'm very, very interested while also noting that there's a big delta this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like could very easily be a first rounder, could be back at Oregon or wherever, right? In this transfer era, you never know, right? Not to say he's unhappy at Oregon or anything. Want to be clear about that. But yeah, big delta in terms of what his ceiling and floor outcomes could be this year, I think.
All right. My last guy, and this is a little bit of a different one. But this is somebody that I first started talking about as an NBA prospect almost 2 years ago now. He was a sophomore at Drake when that happened. And now he's a senior at West Virginia playing for his dad. Tucker DeVries, 6'7", 220 pounds. What's that?
This rocks.
Are you a Tucker guy?
I mean, I love him. I don't know if he's, we'll talk through it. I love watching him play.
Okay. He turns 22 next month. He shot, let me first own this because I am projecting him as a specialist. Admittedly, his shooting numbers at Drake, 34%, 37%, and 36% from 3 over the course of the 3 years. I did not look up the advanced analytics on Synergy in terms of where he rated in terms of open catch and shoot threes. What I will tell you is when the ball comes off his hand, you think it's going in every time. When he misses, he doesn't miss by much. Everything is around the rim. He has been similar to what I said in terms about like KJ Evans having to do things in the post now that he's not going to be asked to do at the next level. DeVries, especially Drake, had to do like a lot of mid-range stuff, a lot of mid-post stuff. And honestly, like he's got some game there, although I don't think that's what's going to be asked of him at the NBA level. He is, the easy criticism is going to be like the athletic limitations. I think what is more foundational, I will say, is the durability and how healthy he is, because I've been told like he hasn't really been 100% in the last couple of years. And that's why he's been good enough to play, but not good enough where he wanted to go through the pre-draft process. Like he just wanted to try and get his body totally right. He is someone who, in addition to being like an elite floor spacer and a movement shooter, in my opinion, having extreme gravity, all that stuff, like is a very willing ball mover, is someone who, is actively telling other people where to be. And I get it. When it's your dad's playbook, you should know it better than everybody else. But like just high IQ. And that to me is like, when you're super smart and have enough positional size, even though you have some athletic limitations, like you're going to be able to understand scheme and stuff like that defensively and maybe not be as bad as people thought. Like I remember, quick sidebar, I had Jamison Battle on the draftables for like a long time. Everybody told me I was nuts. And I was like, but Jamison Battle's in the rotation for Toronto. I mean, maybe he won't be for long, but he's got size, he's got shooting, and he can think the game. And I think Tucker, we get into a situation where somebody and this isn't how the draft played out last year, but we get into a situation where somebody's looking for a low salary rotation player who can space the floor, execute the playbook, understand all the coverages and know their role in like the late 20s, or looking for some value in the second round, I could definitely see him being someone who is in that conversation.
Okay, so another guy similar to Kam Jones, where I did like a longer scout on him in the offseason.
Did not.
Yeah, no, I love it. So what I wrote is all comes down to the shooting. Real chance to be a shooting specialist in the NBA. Numbers don't quite do his real shooting talent justice, as he's just been the top option for Drake now for a number of years. Receives an incredible amount of defensive attention, but has pristine mechanics, terrific base underneath him, great balance and rhythm through the shot, momentum always going toward the rim. Even when he's wrong-footed, he still is able to realign and get his momentum going toward the rim. Very clean release at the top, can speed up the release, does really have a substantial dip, but can kind of speed it up when necessary. More than that, though, all situation shooter. So to your point, like doing stuff off of movement, that's the stuff that I love with Tucker. Can run off pin downs and middle actions, whereas momentum is going all the way toward the other basket, and then can either use a pivot or a hop turn to get his feet square to the rim with balance underneath him and knock down the shots.
He loves it.
Loves it. Makes them out of flares going to his right or left, makes them out of pick and pops. Just his unbelievable footwork is what it comes down to for me as a shooter. And that base is where everything comes from for Tucker. He's awesome. I think, like, if you look through his pull up numbers, 33 out of 67 per synergy on 3-point attempts out of ball screens. It's damn near 50%. 28 out of 69 from handoffs. That's, well over 36%. It's similar to Duncan Robinson in terms of like partnership with his big in the situations that he runs with. Right. Now, like, do I think Tucker DeVries is likely to become the shooter that Duncan turned into? Probably not, because Duncan turned into probably one of the 5 best shooters on planet Earth. Yeah. And expecting that of anybody is very difficult. And I mean, honestly, having you on the show here, this is fun, because if there is someone who is a knapsack legend, it is both you and Duncan Robinson.
Did you ever listen to the podcast episode where Duncan came on my show and we talked about when I was a prep school coach and took somebody else over Duncan Robinson?
No, but this is amazing. Please tell.
Yeah. He and his best friend, Harry Rafferty, told me they wanted to come to Choate. Now, I'm sure they wanted to go to Exeter too. It's where they ended up going. Exeter's phenomenal place, phenomenal coach. But I was like, I had one kid. I was still kind of doing the media thing, so I didn't want to handle kids who were like have to deal with anybody's recruitment. And I had both Yale and Columbia wanting to place kids. They were already committed. So it was just like, okay, I took those kids. Duncan was committed to, or shortly thereafter, he committed to a friend of mine, head coach at Williams at the time, Mike Maker. Great offensive mind, amazing offensive mind. And then we ended up playing in the New England finals, and Duncan torched us. And yeah, so that's the story about the local scout who chose somebody else over Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson ends up to become, like you said, 5 best shooters in the world and $90 million player. And there you go.
He deserves it. He deserves it for the work. Yeah. So with DeVries, though, I think Duncan was a bit more natural as a mover, not in terms of quickness or explosiveness, but just like fluidity through his hips more than anything. So with Tucker, I feel like he's just like a little bit stiff through the hips. And that's what worries me in the NBA, particularly defensively, is those are the guys that I think can sometimes like really get torched a little bit. Now look, Tucker is 6'7" or so. To your point on Jaeger earlier, to your point here, I think it's just easier to hide guys that are 6'7". It's getting harder to hide anybody in the NBA. but it's easier to do so with guys that are a little bit bigger. So so again, like I did a Tucker profile in the summer, like in terms of just like for the draft guide for next year. Cause like he's not going to change much. You know what I mean? Like he's going to play for his dad again. We know what this is going to look like.
I hope the splits are better. Like with, now the West Virginia is not like loaded, but with Hansberry and Small and stuff like that, I hope opposing he's got to shoot it better than 37%. The one thing that I think we don't talk about, and I'd be curious if you think it's relevant, he's got pretty good defensive metrics. Like he gets steals. He gets his hands on a lot of balls. He's got good anticipation. And that to me is just another indicator that he can think the game more quickly than most on the defensive end of the floor as well.
No, I agree. I think he has really good hand-eye coordination. I think that actually is something I put in this thing. Good feel on the defensive end, always aware of what's happening around him in team defense, makes the right rotations regularly, averaged over a steal per game, including 1.6 per game as a junior, gets them a little bit, or also gets them through being timely as opposed to gambling. So yeah, like generally agree. It's going to come down to him maximizing his body. Like I always refer back in my brain to Brian Scalabrine talking about like how he had to completely and utterly maximize his quickness. Like every single day he had a freaking like ladder out on the court and was doing quickness drills because he knew that that's what he had to maximize to be able to stick in the NBA. Whatever that is for Tucker, that's what he has to do.
And to the original point, a requisite of that is being healthy enough to get 100% of whatever you've got. If you're kind of limited and then you're unhealthy, that becomes problematic. So I hope that he gets, if he's not, that he becomes fully healthy, because I do believe that when you can think the game and you can shoot the game at an elite level, you can usually carve out a spot for yourself.
Okay. So do you have any more players? Because I have a couple that I'm willing to bring up.
All right. Yeah. Hit me.
Okay. I want to talk to you about Asa Newell.
Okay. Interesting.
Because yes, that's exactly what my reaction is watching him at Montverde. And I don't know what to do with him, if I'm being completely honest. He's one of the most interesting prospects in this class to me because he is 6'9", 6'10" in that ballpark. I think they're listing him at 6'11" now, so maybe he grew a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Very impressive footwork on defense. There are moments of inactivity that I worry about. And then every scout that went to Georgia this year and saw him practice said, you know what? Like he's just kind of, floating around the perimeter a little bit. He's not really, going to attack on the interior. He's not like willing to use his physicality. And then to your point on watching things that are different, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get told in his opener, no, like you should watch the opener. He looked very different. Everything was on the interior.
Yeah.
He had 26 and 11 in the opener, was really good. Now my brain is in a pretzel with Asa Newell in terms of like, I don't know what to do with him.
Welcome to the party. That's what, yeah. That's, here's what I will say for context. He has been a player who over the last 2 years of high school, what you thought of him could vary greatly depending on the setting, which is very consistent with everything you just said from the last few months, right? If you saw him in USA basketball, both the summer before his junior and the summer before his senior year, you would say he's a top 10, top 5 player in the class. He looked phenomenal, flying around the court, playing with athleticism, being both a vertical spacer and being able to stretch you a little bit out to the 3-point line, even though there was some occasional like side spin every once in a while. Similarly, having some versatility on the defensive end where he could get up and block a shot, but he could also move his feet enough to be fairly versatile in ball screens. I don't mean like he's switching everything, but I mean like, he wasn't just in deep drops. He could hedge a little bit. He could be relative different positions in the ball screen.
And I've seen him like stick. Like again, like I don't know if he's like switchable necessarily, but like if he gets caught, he can manage himself out there in a way that is not like he's definitely not just getting cooked by any stretch.
And then so he'd come off these big summers, USA basketball in particular. He'd go back to Montverde, and these Montverde teams were loaded. This is like even before, this is even when they were a year younger. This is like Cooper Flagg, Liam McNeely, so Derek Queen, all
Rob
those
Wright's on that team.
Yeah. And all of those guys, even though they were a year younger, played over him. I'm sorry, they weren't. They were the same grade, but they were. They say they had 6 starters last year, but the year before, when they were juniors and Cooper was a sophomore, like Derek, Liam, and Cooper, like those were the guys. And Asa, is it Asa or is it Asa? I've always
Asa.
I'm terrible with pronunciations, but he really didn't play very much that junior season, and so it was this whole thing where we were expecting a huge year based on what we'd seen in the summer in USA basketball. And then it was this disappointing high school campaign. Comes back the next summer, same thing, USA basketball. Really, he's a dude. And then it was better in high school, but not quite to the same extent, and clearly not to the same level of impact as Derek, Liam, Cooper, Rob Wright, and who am I forgetting who's at LSU right now? Curtis Givens, who was like, those were the 6 starters that they rotated through, like the Antoine Jameson UNC teams, 6 starters for 5 spots. So, and I alluded to this point earlier with KJ Evans. That's who played over him the year before. You know how I said it was pretty transparent when you were watching the Montverde huddles, like who was in the doghouse and who wasn't?
Yeah.
And you don't really know why. Like, is he missing rotations? Is he missing matchups? Is there things from the clipboard that aren't carrying over? But it was pretty clear, especially that junior season, that there was a learning curve going on. And so what I will say is that what scouts are going to have to contend with is there is a pattern of inconsistencies that now goes back multiple years. And trying to figure out the root of that inconsistency is going to be the challenge for scouts. And so I think from an archetype perspective, I think he's really interesting, because if you get a big-ish guy who can stretch you in multiple ways, space it and vertically, and can be versatile defensively, like that's golden, right? The modern NBA, that's huge. So I think people it's really easy to get excited about the archetype, but there are some just patterns of inconsistency that scouts are going to need to try and get to the root of.
I am so interested to watch him this year. And the second guy I wanted to bring up is somebody who is somewhat similar. Let's go with Donnie Freeman. Not like totally similar players. Like Donnie is like more of like a pull up, like mid-range guy when I've watched him a lot of the time. But like sick athlete, skinny kid from the Bahamas, grew up in DMV area, then went down to IMG, if I remember correctly. Right?
Yeah, team takeover kid through and through. Yep.
Goes to Syracuse. Was just all I was going to finish with was goes to Syracuse this year, and we'll see what it looks like. But another kid, when I watched the tape, I was just like, I don't know what to do with this, but I'm fascinated. I know that.
So he was a part of that team takeover squad that won an EYBL championship. They had like Pat Nagumba and Darren Harris, and I think Malik Mack was on that team too, even though he was the backup. And so that group came up together, and Donnie was always known as the most naturally talented, but candidly, like underachiever is a harsh word, but that was like, it was more potential than production early on.
Sure.
That started to shift going into his senior year. He went down to IMG, Sean McAloon, who's also got like DMV roots. So there was a relationship there. And had a really good senior season. What I will tell you, though, is there's a few events every year that some people, like whether it's big national media or high level NBA executives, like that those are the places that they come to get a glimpse at people. Whether it's like, national media loves to go, like national college basketball media loves to go to the Peach Jam, and that's where they form their impressions on the players. So if, for example, Cameron Boozer is sick, like he was in the summer of 2023 and playing through illness, everybody's like, this kid's not that good. And they just have no idea who he actually is. The McDonald's All-American game is a similar type of setting. And Donnie Freeman was great at the McDonald's All-American game. Like, we could do it 10 times and he'd never be better. You know who was another guy who was great at McDonald's, like in the practices, was VJ Edgecombe. Those guys
I've been told that. And he was amazing at Hoop Summit as well, for what it's worth.
Yeah, so like those guys, like NBA GMs are sitting there and they're like, and you'll have this like, they're like, oh, that guy should be higher. And it's like, you should watch for another month and then we'll see if I'm still wrong, and maybe I am, and probably will be. But, Donnie looked great. Donnie looked 6'10", mobile, splashing threes. He's always had great hands. He's always had touch, but now it's starting to extend itself. I don't think Donnie is necessarily, I don't think you're going to see the same level of production from Donnie as we have from some of the other freshmen so far this week, because it's been a phenomenal week for freshmen already. I don't think he's going to be ready to make that level of splash, but he's a very exciting long-term prospect. And he may end up, what's going to be really interesting is if the level of production in college ever reaches the level of potential, because there's glaring tools, touch, mobility, hands, athleticism, all that, shooting potential, you name it. But I don't know that he's ever been a guy who goes out and gets you 20 every single night. I'd have to check his numbers last year at IMG, but even his best version of himself was with Takeover was a guy who, like, it was like Big Pat was the guy more often than not, or Darryn was getting hot. It was never like we're playing through Donnie every game. So going to be interesting. And I think there is I think there's a wide variety of potential outcomes there. But I think that the expectations are rooted in large part on the fact that he looked so good in front of all those executives in the practices leading up to McDonald's.
Yeah, and what I can tell you is, like, the scouts who went up to Syracuse and saw him this fall, they were like, okay, maybe this is a guy, maybe it's not a guy. Like, it was a lot more hit or miss, depending on the scout I talked to, depending on probably like the day they saw him practice. You know what I mean? So, I'm intrigued. I mean, they just played a very tight game with Lemoyne in their opener. Donnie Freeman had 10 and 11. Chris Bell had 20 points. The thing that I worry about, Chris Bell can play. Yeah, like he's probably G League Europe guy, but has a chance. Like, you could sell me maybe on him being like a real dude. But the thing that worries me more than anything with Donnie Freeman is, like, who's going to get him the ball more than anything. Like, they have the small guard from Hofstra, Carlos,
Jaquan Carlos.
Yeah. Who, like, I think is probably going to be like their primary lead this year, but JJ Starling, Chris Bell, those guys are scorers. Like, Donnie Freeman is not a guy who can go like get his own shot right now at the college level.
And I think Donnie has always kind of been, somewhat similar to what we said about KJ. I don't think Donnie really wants to be the guy who's got to get you 20 every night. I think like he's going to be most comfortable, but he's in a situation where he's going to need to be pretty good for them. So that's what's interesting. Like, I think we finished with him at 15 last year. And I remember some people were so excited about McDonald's. Like, I think some people had him as high at 7. And I've always been, I've got a really good relationship with like his, can't go higher than this. Like, I mean, I just don't. I think there's still room for too many potential outcomes to put any more pressure on him than like top 15.
Yeah. No, I like it. So that's 6. We went through 6 guys, plus took detours around the country to Tre Johnson and Egor Demin, and even went to high school. We went all across the United States with Adam Finkelstein here. But the most important thing that we have to talk about is last night, Adam Finkelstein
Yes.
went out to dinner with longtime good friend of the program, Matt Pennie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Matthew.
We
miss you
tell
dearly.
this story?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do it from your perspective if you want, because it'll be fun.
Let's do it. So
the reason Fink and I know each other is twofold. There's a college coach who will remain nameless, who we're both quite close with, and Pennie is the second one. So Pennie obviously used to be co-host of the show with me, and I will let you take over from here on how you and I created a relationship.
So Matt Pennie, when he was a walk-on All-American at UMass, he played for one of my best friends in the world, was an assistant coach on that team. So we would always go to games. We would go to the NIT Final Four at Madison Square Garden, where Pennie gave Hoosier level inspirational speeches to the bench. So anyway, this mutual college coach says to me, you and Sam should really connect. You guys, you think about things the same way. You do a lot of the same stuff. I'm like, and this is right in the middle of COVID. So I'm like, all right, great. Let me pop on the podcast. Oh, Pennie does it. Even better. I think it was at year 10 at ESPN, and I had just called the Amani Bates Chet Holmgren game, which for me at ESPN was a huge opportunity, because I had gone from the equivalent of the fifth assistant under Paul Biancardi, and basically worked my way up to the associate head coach. Number 2, the group had gotten smaller. And then so to be asked to call that game was just huge. And because it was in COVID and whatever, I called that game from a closet in Bristol. The person I called it with was in another booth. So we were totally isolated, whatever. Amani, Chet looks great. And anyway, the game's over. Get a lot of compliments on the game. Thank you, did great. 2 days later, I'm driving. I'm listening to the Sam Vecenie show with my good friend Matt Pennie. And I hear Matt Pennie say, as he quoted himself last night, yeah, I don't know, those guys announcing the game just weren't watching the same game I was. Just crushing me. And so I call, now granted, I'm young and emotionally reactive, and I call Pennie and have an emotionally reactive response, which he and I reminisced about at dinner last night. And that's how Sam and I first we didn't talk. I never spoke to you at that, but we didn't connect directly till much later. But yeah, it's a funny story.
Yeah, no, I the funny thing is I had no idea who was calling the game.
Right.
And I've always had an immense amount of respect for you. I was just whoa, what is going on here? You could see that it was weird COVID era, stuff going on too. But yeah, no, I had no idea who was calling that game. It's just clearly, no, it's totally
the thing of, Chet has always, you can go back and Chet was always the guy I had advocated for, but I still say Amani Bates, best 14-year-old player I've ever seen in my life. And it's a sad story, and I said things I shouldn't have said to project him, but it wasn't anywhere near what most people were doing. But still, hand in the air, my bad, lessons learned, won't do that again. But I think trying to manage that dynamic as the game was going on was where you're just trying to be complimentary of both guys and save,
totally.
But yeah, Pennie, I think I said to Pennie, I was the first time you get a microphone put in front of your face, you just crush your friend. And but God bless him. And Pennie's
oh my goodness.
Ever, so it was funny. It's a good story.
Genuinely one of the great people working within basketball, and Matt's doing very, very well in his current role. So we are excited for Matt. But yeah, no, he
was great on the show too.
He was great. We genuinely miss Matt here. I wish that he could come on more often, but unfortunately, his current job precludes that. I would argue. For reasons that will go unsaid. but nothing bad. He just is can't do it. Let's go with probably can't do it. Maybe at some point Matt will come on and we'll talk about movies, but that would be the only way for Matt to come on. But that is Adam Finkelstein over there in Connecticut. Is that where you are?
Connecticut. Connecticut to Australia. Yep.
Yeah, somewhere in the Northeast area. Adam, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
If you're looking for high school stuff, it'll be on 247sports.com or the 247 Sports YouTube channel. If you're looking for NBA draft stuff or most of the college basketball content, it'll be on the CBS Sports site. My social channels are both Adam Finkelstein, Finkelstein, Twitter and Instagram. And this has been great. The Home and Home series, Sam. Thanks for doing this. It's been a ton of fun this week.
We will do it again. I am super excited to have this door open now, to be able to do this. So it'll be time again whenever we get into the college basketball season and we can run through prospects and dig into this thing. So that is Adam Finkelstein. I'm Sam Vecenie. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember, rate, review, subscribe, do everything you can to support the show. If you are on social media, please help out fearless leader of the program, GMAC, Andrew Claudio. Subscribe, follow over on TikTok, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever you call it. Game Theory Game Theory Sam V. That is your handle to follow. Game Theory Sam V. We will be back. I don't know if we'll go live or not tonight. We'll see. My guess is probably no. Depends on how good the NBA games are. But my guess is probably no. We will wait until maybe next week to go live again on Sunday with Bryce. I'm not making that call now, though. We'll see. We'll see if I need to break down some tape tonight based off of what I see in these games. Until next time, though, we'll talk soon. Bye.